Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop's Rate of Rise series, where we get into elevated conversations around roasting. And hopefully, what we do talk about here leads to more inspiration, more tools, more guidance to roast coffee better, to run a roastery better, and that kind of thing. And we've done lots and lots of these episodes. If you just search ROR or Rate of Rise on the Keys to the Shop website, keystotheshop.com, we make it really easy for you to just search in the search bar and come up with all the content related to roasting that has been a part of this series now for a few years. And this, like I said, is brought to you by Mill City Roasters. Go to their website, millcityroasters.com, and you'll immediately see this is the kind of company that not only produces amazing coffee roasters for any of your coffee roasting needs, they do a fantastic job. I mean, the integrity of the build and of the philosophy and the service behind this equipment speaks for itself in the production of so many roasters around the world. But the crew there is also fantastic and world-class at education and training and working with coffee roasters to bring about a profitable coffee business. They are people. And I can't speak highly enough about them. I've even been through their 101 class. I wouldn't consider myself a professional roaster, but I did roast coffee that was drinkable and enjoyable. And it only took an afternoon. Now, that was pretty cool. Mill City folks are the ones you should reach out to for your coffee roasting needs. If you're thinking about scaling up your roaster or switching to a different machine or getting into roasting to begin with, go to millcityroasters.com. Now, today's episode, like I said, we're going to be talking about the art of the dark. Now, that I just really chose that title for alliteration purposes. We could come up with all sorts of snazzy ways of putting it, but I hesitate to even use the word dark because today's guest is really trying to go beyond what's light and dark and medium and all of that, and focus in on a way of roasting coffee that's artistic, or the artisan old school kind of way of doing coffee. In the idea is, let's focus in on finished temperatures and really listen to and create a process of roasting coffee that is not just a prescription based follow the curve and don't ever question and ironically pursue consistency but don't get consistency because there's not enough intentionality behind it. Erik Johnson of thinkwell.coffee out there in Waverly, Iowa, has been roasting for quite a long time. He began as a barista in 2006 and has been roasting professionally since 2012 and has been working as the head roaster or as a head roaster for regional brands in the past. He's worked across the supply chain from producers to millers and from village to importers, and now he runs a production roastery that's Thinkwell Coffee that's open to the public. It offers beans, no drinks, but it offers beans for people who value beauty, balance, and brewing at home. And he believes that coffee is art, and that great coffee is built on harmony between people, earth, and the roast itself. And you're going to get that vibe from Erik as we talk to him about the operations there and the approach and philosophy on developing coffee. We talk a lot about the dark roasted coffee and developed coffees, but we also think a lot about the philosophy that undergirds the roasting of all levels of coffee, whether you would have a higher finished roast temp or a lower one, resulting in what you would classically call a light or a dark roast. The move here is to try to create a little bit more of a bent and lean towards intentionality. And not only that, we get to talk with him about the feedback from customers and the critical nature of having this connection with the final flavor and what kind of decisions we make to shoot for with coffee that makes the most sense. You're going to learn a lot about this approach. And also, we talk about how we're going to figure out what coffees, or at least how Erik figures out what coffees are best for a little bit more developed nature, a little bit more of that heft and that classic coffee profile. I see a ton more of this stuff on the market. It's not really ever gone out of style. It's just that I think coffee professionals are becoming a little bit more savvy, and they're not too cool for school as we used to be. And we're kind of waking up to what we were kind of sleeping on before. And it's folks like Erik and Thinkwell Coffee that are helping, lead the charge into coffees that customers enjoy. So I'm glad to have the opportunity to talk to Erik, and let's get right to it. Here now is my conversation with Erik Johnson of Thinkwell Coffee. Erik, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Great. Thanks, Chris. Thanks so much for having me on here.
Yeah, my pleasure. You are in Thinkwell Roasting. One of we're going to talk about the model you have for this business and roasting in general, but on these episodes, obviously we're focused on roasting, and we're fond of thinking of roasting as somewhat of a potential builder in coffee, and the potential to have customers enjoy coffee. It's pretty simple. It can be complex. You have to choose your lane, and you've developed a particular way of doing things. And so I just kind of want to start at the beginning here. Give us a brief kind of summary of how you got into roasting coffee, into Thinkwell Coffee.
Well, yeah, again, man, I love your show. Super excited to be here. And I love these Rate or Rise episodes. So it's just like a blast to be on here. I actually started roasting at home on a popcorn popper. I was pretty into coffee. I wasn't like as into it as I am now, but I was getting pretty into it, and I was working as a director for a wilderness program. And one of my guides got a hold of me and said, "Hey, do you know that you can roast coffee at home?" And I just was like, "What are you talking about, man?" So I think it was later that day, I had from a thrift store an old West Bend Poppery 2 in my hands and some green beans for my friend, and I roasted up a batch. And I mean, it sounds like corny or funny or whatever, but like it was seriously like a spiritual experience for me. And I was just like, this is what I am here to do. So that was the beginning of this journey of getting into roasting, and then getting employed as a roaster, and then kind of bouncing around at different places within the industry as a roaster. Fast forward years, and I had been a barista, so had my wife years before, and so then we had bought a roaster along the way, and then we had this chance to take over a coffee shop. We ran the coffee shop for a few years, and that was we've lived many different places, but this is now where we are here in Northeast Iowa. And we were running this coffee shop, and we just realized, like, man, this whole like coffee shop model that we know, kind of the context for us as coffee drinkers is like so many other people, is just third wave shops, and intentionality around brewing and sourcing and kind of all that stuff. It just really wasn't connecting with what's happening here. And we said, I think we need to change and make a different model. And that's when we started Thinkwell Coffee. That's when the thing that I would say is uniquely ours is our approach to roasting and how we go about our work. Everything is oriented around the batch. I can get really lost in talking about this because I just love this so much. But like, how the batch, just the regular model, how we do it in our industry is the first and foremost thing would be trying to provide a customer with consistency. And so consistency sits as primary. And let's just say it's only consistency. Well, every batch has to be shelved underneath this idea of consistency. And so our approaches to roasting, our methods of roasting, our profiles, how we build our operations are all around this idea of we're going to make a consistent product. Now, I'm doing the exact inverse. So I'm saying, after being a production roaster and roasting tens of thousands of batches, finding like, man, there's some real problems with that approach. There's some ways that it's very inadequate and falls apart, but it's okay because it's like good enough. And we have to, if we adjust our operations and our production in such a way, we can kind of like skate by the having our customers become aware of how it isn't consistent. If you tell people it's consistent and you build your operations to be close enough to being consistent, everybody's like, yes, this is consistent. I would say that the reality of coffee is that it's not consistent. And I'm kind of like saying, let's fully embrace what coffee is, which is a material that changes. I mean, like, we know that it changes crop to crop, year to year. We know that you're not getting the same thing every season, even when we go back to the same farm. We know that there's variances even within the year. You have one lot from when you first buy it to when you're wrapping it up, 10 months later. It doesn't taste the same. And not to mention every batch, and then like the cup itself. I mean, like, even if you have a bag of coffee, one bag that's from this lot, from this one roast, over the 2 or 3 weeks that you have it in your cupboard, it is changing every single day. So I'm just kind of saying the premise is like, experientially, if you're really paying attention to what it is, your experience is saying, wow, this is not the same. This is not consistent. And I wanted to create a model that was oriented towards roasting, towards like bringing out the absolute best in the coffee, holding on to the complexity of what coffee is, which is that it's not consistent, that we need to create a way. And so I just started like going down this path to essentially being where we are now, which is, I guess, I have a model of every batch is its own thing. I'm paying attention to, the charge temperature. I'm paying attention to the batch size. I'm paying attention to what is the finished roast temperature. A big part of what we do is we aren't using the language of light, medium, and dark roast. We're talking about a finished roast temperature. And another operation may have their thermocouples set to a different degree. There's still I can give a range that I'm saying I'm roasting between 385 and 425. And my higher temp roasts are 415 to 425, and my lower temp roasts are 385 to 415. I can communicate that, and this other guy who roasts coffee can give his temperature range, But what's important is those finished roast temperatures, those temps communicate so much more to a customer than saying medium or saying light. So every batch that I'm roasting, I'm recording the finished roast temperature. It's going to be a unique number, and that temperature is telling a person so much more detail than just saying light roast coffee or dark roast coffee.
Yeah. So the customer gets the benefit of having a little bit more detail about the finished temperature of the coffee. And there's two things going on here with this model of like embracing the character traits of a shifting product. So in your approach to it, I imagine there are a set of protocols that are exactly the same, but then there's the allowance for a variation in what you do with a particular coffee, even if it might be a different crop of the same coffee that you had last year. There is an openness to something that is different than that production roasting that you did before, with the consistency as the zenith of what you're doing. What is that difference? So, like, how do you listen to, practically speaking, the coffee in order to make that variant decision?
Well, the variant decision has been built upon years and years of this approach, and slowly building a map inside of my head of so many small little changes, and then drinking that coffee and taking note of what changed with that variance. Did I achieve what I was trying to do? What did change? Roasting multiple batches next to each other and making small tweaks, like the ratio of development time from the browning phase. Now it's many batches of like making small changes and kind of like creating tools and approaches. I mean, there is a part that I would just say is a genuine interaction that's going on between the person who's roasting the coffee and the coffee itself in the roaster. That there's like a when you're cooking something and it's in the pan in front of you, or you're paying attention to the thing that's like changing and forming right in front of you. It's that level of like being tuned into what's going on, paying attention to it. So when you're doing just production, roasting in sort of the traditional sense, we have a profile in front of us and we're just following the profile as closely as you can. There are times where you're making choices for that roast that are beneficial for that profile, beneficial for the recording of the batch. Like, I'm trying to match this up. Oh, I'm a little off. I'm going to make an adjustment to get back onto the profile. Where those adjustments aren't actually beneficial for the coffee or beneficial for the flavors in the cup. It's beneficial for the profile. And we're saying like this profile has to be first, and I need to get it back online because that, and you're making this move in the middle of a roast that if you're paying attention to the beans, I'm not doing the right thing right now, but I got to get back on track with the profile. So I kept running into these parameters. So how I got down this road was like, I'm using other people's approaches. I'm using the parameters that have been given to me, and I keep finding myself going, man, I know I'm doing the wrong thing when I'm following this profile right now. The coffee is telling me one thing in the actual roast, and the profile is telling me I need to do this other move. So enough times of just saying, you know what, I'm going to listen to what I'm feeling from this roast, and then we're going to drink this coffee afterwards. And I had a little bit more leeway at that time because I was a head coffee roaster. So when I'm making a move, it's kind of like I have the freedom to do that. And then we're cupping it as a team, and we're going, yeah, that's better. Now the error would be to just say, this will now be the new profile, because that's how that one batch needed to be maneuvered, versus saying all batches will now be maneuvered in this way. And it was this sort of like unlocking of this rigid form of thinking there is one way to roast this coffee. There is a single approach. Now, how the industry works with this is we recognize it and we feel it intuitively, which is why we begin to knock off huge variables. We say the best way for us to roast is to roast the same batch size every single time, to have the same protocol between batches every single time, to try to get rid of all the things that we know are going to interfere with consistency. So we make all this effort to try to be like, okay, we got to make this thing like box it in and have it be the same. Whereas when you're doing batch after batch after batch, like if you didn't get that turnaround just right, you're 20 seconds behind. So I better like keep that flame up higher to get myself back up onto the profile. If you're doing that with a let's say a softer coffee, you're gonna have these defects, roasting defects. But you got to get that profile right, or even just like when practically speaking, one day you're roasting. Instead of a regular, 40-pound batch, it's a super expensive coffee, and there's only a 5-pound bag ordered, and you're kind of like, we aren't going to roast 40 pounds of this because people don't order it much, and they don't want it to sit on the shelf, so we're going to roast a 20-pound batch instead of a 40-pound batch. Well, the profile, when you're following a profile for a 40-pound batch and you have 20 pounds in there, you're not roasting it right. So there's all of these things that as I kept finding these parameters, as I kept feeling this limitation between the framework that's been given to me, I'm just going like, man, I have to just like slowly disassemble them. And it wasn't, when I'm chatting with roasters, they'll kind of be like, well, how do you even know where to start? And like, didn't you roast a bunch of bad coffee? And it was kind of like, you have a safe space. All of us have like a safe sort of parameter around which we're roasting our coffees. Like for me, it was within other companies. I have a profile that was given to me. And then like you kind of have familiarity and you just push it out just a little bit more and a little bit more. And you just sort of begin to understand what happens when I do these things and those things. And so now I do have sort of a much broader set of tools and a broader area I can roast in.
Right. Let me just kind of bring this into this question that's been kind of rolling around my mind as I'm listening to this explanation, and just clarifying for people that this isn't the anti-consistency routine. It sounds like, yeah, consistency is good in terms of how a customer experiences a coffee. Now, is true consistency possible? I don't know. Can, whatever existential or enigma question you want to ask, like, is it? I don't know. Probably not. But the idea is you're making adjustments. You say there are times where you're just obeying the roast curve, you're obeying the parameters, and you know the coffee needs something different in order to achieve what sounds like the flavor, the experience you want your customer to have as a result of drinking that coffee, which in and of itself is sort of like that North Star, that decision of we have a certain number of coffees, we kind of want this coffee to come out tasting like this. Given, yeah, there's of course variance, and coffee says, well, I also want to add this. The coffee does what the coffee does, but you also make a decision about what the coffee should taste like at the other end of all of your other decisions in roasting it. Am I expressing that accurately? Like, you do have sort of a goal to reach. It's not that you don't have a goal. It's just the means is different.
You're totally right, because when I'm showing up, I have more intentionality, I have more focus, I have more of a plan of what I am trying to achieve when I'm going to the roaster than I would when I have a profile in front of me. And it
Yeah.
demands that I think first, where am I trying to end this? What is it that I'm trying to have my customer experience? Like, and then I need to be paying attention. How hot is the roaster? How long have I been roasting for? Is this the first batch or the 15th batch? How much weight am I putting in here? Where's the airflow at? What am I, you have this whole, you begin to use your brain in a way that, for me, I'm saying coffee is art. It's not this like cold, hard, calculated manufacturing science. You have to treat this material like it's alive and responding to you. And so I need to activate my brain. I need to activate my creativity. I need to listen. And when I have an intentionality towards what the end is going to be, whether I'm throwing a 12-pound batch or a 25-pound batch or a 45-pound batch, I can land the roast into a very similar spot. Whereas if I had a profile and I changed a factor of any of there's myriad options of what variables can happen. Like, you change one of those and you hold on to the same profile, you are going to end up with a different tasting coffee. And if your consistency is the end, if consistency is your zenith, it's your North Star, a profile isn't going to help you achieve that when a variance comes.
So now let's get into this idea of who it is you're serving, because I do think that there is an art and science to this. The art is similar to what you're describing, is what I imagine the old world way of making coffee before technological assistance. People used to listen to, smell. Even today, you bake something in the oven. Sometimes I still go by the idea that everyone's oven is different, and the cake is done when you smell it the second time in the oven. Like, I smell it in the first and it's second crack of the cake. I don't know. So I feel like there's this harkening back to an old world way of connecting. But another old world way of connecting is that a lot of the roasting that you're doing is very much and intentionally so connected to the consumer and the person who's purchasing that coffee. And in your area, there's, I'm sure, a lot of folks whose taste for coffee is just kind of in the classic sense. It's not as acidic as a normal high end, quote unquote, coffee professional, the third wave progressive palate. And so you've got to be pretty good at roasting things that are going to be soluble, more developed, what we say dark, or in your case, a higher temperature finish temp, right? So, how do you approach both gauging your customer satisfaction with coffee and then roasting a range in your lineup effectively, so that solubility is there, but people who get a dark roast or a medium or otherwise would have a good experience no matter what.
Yeah, I like how you're saying it because I am really, so being in Northeast Iowa, we're in a very different spot, like culturally around coffee than when you go to San Francisco, let's say. But I mean, for just even regionally, when you go up to Minneapolis, go over to Madison, it's just really different coffees than what people are having here. I would say half the coffees, maybe, yeah, half the coffees, maybe a little bit more, but half the coffees that I roast are these low temp roasts. They are brighter, lighter, more vibrant, complex stuff. But we sell a lot of coffees that are a higher roast temp. So it is trying to meet people where they're at. Some of the language that I use it when I'm trying to figure out what customers are looking for is just saying, there's this more traditional set of flavors. And a lot of people, when they have this, like, whatever they're like, when you say coffee, there's this concept that's in their head. And part of that concept is roastiness or smokiness. It's there. And so when they come in and they're saying, I'd like some coffee, they really need to have that element present in the cup. And I don't think that I would be functioning as a business. I wonder what it would be like if I only had low temperature roasts here. I don't think it would work. But I don't personally have any kind of issue with roasting higher temperature roasts. I mean, part of it is like when I roasted at other coffee companies, I was having to roast some pretty dark roasts pretty consistently. And again, to go back to like the experience of being the roaster behind the machine, I really didn't like roasting those coffees. I could tell I'm like breaking these coffees. I'm killing them. I'm ruining the thing that's like really amazing about them. And so when I got to be in charge of my own roasting and dictate how I'm doing it, I really thought that I could find this space where I can develop the beans fully. I can make them, easily extractable. I can give people essentially, like, I'm roasting for balance, whether I'm doing those lower temperature roasts or I'm doing a higher temperature roast. When I go into the higher temperature roast range, what it is that I'm trying to balance out is you have sweetness. You have sweetness that's there whether you're roasting for a lower temperature roast or a higher temperature roast. That's going to be there. Now, the component that you're trying to balance that sweetness out with in the lower range is just acidity, it's just brightness. As you get higher in the roast temps, the acidity for a lot of coffees begins to drop off, and it begins to take on the edge that is present in like roasty flavors. So now, as I get higher up in roast temperature, I'm trying to balance that sweetness with the edge of a little roasty, little smokiness. None of my coffees that I roast, it's not going to be traditionally like a dark roast on a traditional sense. But for people who are used to drinking dark roasts are going to have these coffees and be like, oh, these are the ones. These are the ones that I want. This is that traditional concept of coffee. It has that backbone to it. It has the roastiness to it.
Well, good. Pause there for a second, because you said not traditional dark roast, but the people who drink that traditional dark roast would be like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Because,
okay. So what do you mean by traditional dark roast?
A coffee that, if we're going to use my thermocouples as the gauge, a coffee that is roasting 435, 445 into the 450s, okay? Where you're looking at it, the body of the bean is fully expanded, super smooth. Certainly there's oils present, a level of darkness to it that is shades darker than where I'm going. Now, the sort of like the approach that I'm having or the argument that I'm having to my customers who are like, give me that dark roast, it's kind of like, hey, you can have that set of flavors present while you still haven't lost that inherent character of the bean. Because, the longer you have that bean in the roaster, you're just losing the inherent characteristic. The thing that I purchased it for at the cupping table just is going out the chimney the longer I have it in the roaster and the higher it goes in temperature. So I'm trying to take this raw ingredient and I'm trying to present it to them in a way that has this element that in their head they're saying, I have to have it. I have to have roastiness. And so I say, okay, I'll meet you there. I'll get into that range where that note will be in the cup. But I'm also going to stop it prior to losing the inherent character. I'm going to approach that spot where roastiness is present. I'm going to approach it in a way that is going to give you so much more flavor and will still meet that need that you have around what you think coffee is supposed to taste like.
Nice. Okay. Good. And so that really helps clarify it, because we have visual indicators of what dark is, because those indicators tell us that the visual indicates a guarantee of an experience. It's a signifier that, past this point lies roastiness that you like. And it used to be like very oily, very dark, brittle. The 1 pound bag of a coffee that was roasted dark was like 2 times the size and volume of a coffee that was roasted medium, right? And by the way, I want to point out what a good dark roast voice that was, because people ask for dark roast. I want a dark roast. Yeah, it's anyone asking for the single origin espresso. Hey, you have a single origin. It's very light register. Anyway, there's a whole episode we could do about this. But you're roasting and developing a coffee with this backbone and this classic coffee flavor. Does this approach also kind of work not for the effect of the flavor that a dark roast has, that roastiness, the chocolates, the things, the deeper tones and that kind of thing, but I imagine that also works pretty well to develop backbone in even a lighter coffee. That's what's good for that is also good for the other.
You end up having to get there in different ways. I mean, it's to achieve sweetness. So, like in a lower temperature roast, to achieve sweetness while keeping acidity present is like a different dance with the beans than if you're trying to get up to a higher temperature. Leave those notes in it that are precious to you while like beginning to present this I hate to use the word like charred, but like it's just you're bringing this part into the bean where you're bringing it to a point where it has this element to it that the cellular body of the bean has been burnt. It like goes to this real toasty place where you're like, yeah, you can crunch it with your fingers. So like one of the things that I would say is like time. And how do you control time? Well, you don't control time. You're controlling your flame and your airflow. You're moving this mass through time, but you have to really have this different approach where if I'm going to go to let's say I have a coffee that has an acidity which is prone to leave at the higher temperatures that you get to, but I want that acidity to be present in the cup. I'm going to apply like a lower flame setting than I normally would. I go all the way up normally. I'm gonna back it off to like 2/3. I'm gonna let this thing just slowly build up steam, and I'm never really gonna hit it too hard, because hitting it too hard, you can lose acidity. Roasting it too long, you're gonna lose acidity. So I'm gonna just let it sit and just gain momentum. And where a low temperature roast, I'm gonna begin to like coast things out and let things develop their sweetness. The acidity is naturally present. On a higher temperature roast, I'm going to let this thing slowly build so that I move right through those lower temperature roasts and get right up to that spot where you can smell, you can see this is going to start having some smokiness to it, but it never was pushed too hard and it never sat in there for too long, but it got up to this spot that once you drop that batch, it's going to have both this acidic part to it. The acidity is still present. You haven't lost it all, and you have this whole like developed body with a little bit of roastiness present. So,
love it. Yeah. Okay. So then it begs the question of sourcing of coffees that will respond well or every green coffee has a particular promise based on the sample roast of that importer, or even the classic tale of you do the sample roasting, and then whatever it is you sampled comes to you and it's slightly different because of transit or time, storage, and moisture and that kind of stuff. So, and time is a great way to figure out like what you can really expect. But how do you go about sourcing and setting your expectations for a coffee ahead of the actual development of your goals for that coffee, or the end temperatures and so forth?
Yeah, I mean the cupping table is the place where you see what is present, what's present there, what kind of sweetness is present, what kind of body is present. You got to take into consideration the density of the bean. I think that you have to look at origin as well, because there's some origins that are just really going to, you know, take on heat in a much better way than other origins. So,
Oh, okay.
or that the acidity will leave. There's some beans that the acidity just disappears, or the pleasing things. And that's what I guess I mean when I'm saying acidity. There's certain stuff that when I'm at the cupping table, I'm drinking it, and I just know I love this. This is going to be the best low temperature coffee, but I know I can't. I'm not going to bring this up to a higher temperature roast. There's ones that you drink that you can tell that there is this very, I mean, the acidity is so strong and so present, or there's such huge sweetness and body, and it's buttery, and you can tell that the depth is there, and you can just sit and roast that thing. And what I'm always looking for are coffees. I'm looking for a green bean that I can roast in a multitude of ways. I'm not looking for a coffee that has one particular note that I'm trying to present to people. And when you know that I'm not having a single profile for a coffee, that I'm going to roast this so many different ways, you approach your purchasing, your how you cup, how you analyze what's going on. You end up approaching that really differently too.
I bet. Yeah. Okay. So what is the approach for, let's just say it's a coffee that is a little bit more developed, has a higher finish temp, where there's this balance. It's not an overwhelming, it's not the char, you right, that you were talking about before. It's the uh, well developed, right? So when you're looking for coffees, you said you can just roast that thing. Now, of course, that sounds kind of cavalier, and I don't think you mean it literally, because you're calculating exactly what the development and the loss of those things are. Similar to if you have a recipe that in baking, they say when they say lemon zest, for example, in a recipe, and I think everyone else probably should just assume you need to put more in, because what happens in the baking is the dulling of the particular flavor profile that you thought lemon brought. It was like, wow, that seems like a lot. But baking removes a lot of that. So it's not that you're saying, well, we can just do whatever we want in this coffee because it's super strong. It's more like a calculated removal and development.
Yeah, yeah, and so particularly one a person just has to think about what do they want to offer on their menu. So how a pea berry would act when you're roasting at a higher temperature roast is going to be pretty different than if you're just having a mixed screen size. But if you let's say that you have on the cupping table, this coffee has a ton of lemon in it. You know, the likelihood of that being present in a higher temperature roast is very unlikely. Now, it's very small that it's going to be there. Now, if you're sitting there cupping it and you're going, wow, this is a huge body. There's a ton of nuttiness. There's a lot of cacao in here. And it does, and what's crazy is like you can, because you know that the higher you're going in your roast temperature, you're peeling off details, okay, and you're getting down to like these underlying tones. So when you're cupping, you're looking for underlying tones. I don't need a specific kind of nut. I'm not looking for like, oh, this is macadamia or this is hazelnut or something. I mean, to just say this is a really pleasing nuttiness. This is a very nice sweetness. Versus when you're looking for a lighter roast, you're saying like, I want that lemon. I want this specific floral note or this, you have these little real intricate details which you can present in a lower temperature roast. Higher temperature roast, you're kind of looking for building blocks, like big, simple blocks on the cupping table. As you add development to that, it just fills that thing out and presents this beautiful cup.
I like that. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, I kind of want to ask a final question here around your conversations with roasters. This is a conversation. This conversation with you as a roaster is basically with the roasters listening to it. As people think about your approach and maybe how they might apply it to their situation, what is it that you are hoping roasters would be inspired by or can take away from your experiences that would lead to better coffee?
Yeah, I like that question. I mean, first off, I would say if anybody wants to reach out to me and find us on Thinkwell website, social media, whatever, reach out to us. I would love to have conversations, and I have all sorts of people who tell me that I'm crazy and I'm wrong. And I will just say, a person might not agree with what it is that I'm doing or the way that I'm approaching it, but like, there's no BS here. This is, I'm not tricking anybody. This is no gimmick. This is what I'm saying is like it's really a valid approach, and I hope that what people, if they're going to take away anything, I hope that people consider using finish roast temperature as an option. Even if a person is doing profile roasting, they're going for consistency, I would still say consider using finish roast temperature. What it communicates to your customer is so huge. One, it's way more accurate. They're going to know what it is that they're drinking in a far more precise way, even between the coffees, your own coffees on the shelf that they're looking at. They will conceptually understand higher temperature, darker the roast, lower temperature, lighter roast. And when they're looking at a 420 degree roast versus a 402 versus a 392, they're going to immediately understand what's happening. So they're going to get a clearer picture of what's in their cup than just saying light, medium, dark, as well as you're bringing to them something that's true about the coffee. It's connected to the roasting itself, where I just feel like the whole concept of roasting in our customers' minds isn't developed. They don't have a concept of what this is and how it affects what's going on in the cup. So I would say, talk about finish roast temperature with your customers, communicate with that. It's far better than light, medium, dark. And you're beginning to, like, especially if you are a coffee roaster, to be able to give them information around roasting that is bringing that into the conversation,
Very cool. Man, Erik, I appreciate your approach and your passion for how this translates to a great customer experience across a range of different finish temps and coffee styles, and the craftsman old world approach in a new era. I love the art and the science of coffee, and I appreciate you kind of bringing all of this to bear in this conversation. So you mentioned the website. Maybe mention it again. Where can we learn more about Thinkwell?
It is at thinkwell.coffee, not .com, .coffee. And then we are on Instagram and on YouTube. We got some roasting stuff on YouTube as well. So,
well, everybody, I hope that you enjoyed that conversation. So you go to the website thinkwell.coffee to learn more about what Erik does. It's a pretty cool website. You can buy coffee and experience all the different offerings that he has to offer. But I hope that you took away from this an inspiration to sort of rekindle and reawaken certain senses that you may have turned off because you were turning on the computer and not really being as connected to the process. I think there's a lot of value here. Whether you agree or disagree, I think we can all agree on the idea that intentionality and connecting yourself to the work and the people that enjoy it at the other end, the customer experience, is highly valuable. And that alone, engaging that way alone with the coffee and with the people who drink it, leads to better coffee. And so thanks very much, Erik, for joining us on the show. We really appreciate it. And I said in the beginning, I'll say again, check out Mill City Roasters over at millcityroasters.com. These are folks who really, I think they are thinkers. They are teachers. They are manufacturers and supporters of coffee roasting. And I don't think I could really recommend anybody better. So go ahead and check them out, millcityroasters.com. And that's it for today's Rate of Rise series. If you have any questions, go ahead and reach out. Chris at keystotheshop.com. DM me on Instagram. Reach out on LinkedIn. All that fun stuff. I'm here to talk. That's what I do. And we have conversations. Hopefully, we're making the coffee world a better place. So thanks, everybody. And as always, I truly hope that this episode has given you keys to the shop.